Oh, we're live.
I think
Welcome. We're live. Welcome to Homo Ludens, the channel on history and board gaming. Today we're going to be discussing neither history nor board gaming, as is tradition. And instead, we have a debrief of a fascinating experimental game called Over Under, which lasted over the past month, and Pierre will introduce soon. We have two guests with us. We have Sanai from Seedling Games and Luke Gearing, who is a RPG writer, designer who's written some of the module which this was inspired this game. Sanai's written quite a few different RPG modules for systems like Ken and Morkborg and other things as well. And both of them also were fairly influential players in the game. So Luke became one of the bosses of one of the factions under the name Big Dog Beefstink, and Sanai became one of the bosses of my faction, the Teamsters, under the name Alcyone Greek, which we were struggling with earlier. Anyway, that's us. And I'm Joe, and this is Pierre. Regular viewers know us, but we're sometimes co-hosts on this channel. So over to Pierre for an intro of the game.
Yeah, of course. So the game was a month-long, described as real-time play-by-post on Prospero's Dream. Prospero's Dream is a sort of space station sort of role-playing game thing that was present in the book that Joe is holding right now called Pound of Flesh, part of it written by Luke Gearing here. So Mothership is the basic game that's based on. It's a sci-fi role-playing game by Tuesday Night Games, specifically Sean McCoy. Really, really good game if anyone's interested in. I think even a few people on the server and following the channel rave about Mothership quite often. In the game, there were several factions. I think there were 6 factions who were all sort of interacting with each other, speaking to each other constantly in a big Discord server. Several people per faction. I think it started with 3 people per faction were bosses who had a lot of extra powers, and everyone else was sort of started outside the factions and had to talk to these bosses initially to get recruited to these factions. The game had, I think, 1,600 players in the end, which is insane. Some of these factions were huge. At one point, the Solarian faction, that was the church, had almost half the player base sort of signed up to it. And I think the CHC, who are like the hacker collective that Luke's character was sort of one of the bosses for, had, I think, how many people in it was, what was the maximum sort of
at the end we had like 36, but for most of the game we had like 30 pretty bang on.
Right. So of like 1,600 people, that's a huge sort of swing to like how sort of much weight the factions had. Sam Sorensen, the person who designed this game, describes it as a war game based on his game Cataphracts, which we'll probably talk to a bit later at the end of this discussion. I think it's sort of a non-traditional description of a war game, a non-traditional example of a war game, but it's really interesting due to its sort of, the key thing is its real-time nature. Like, it was a month, one day equaled one day, like it was super interesting. So yeah, go ahead, Joe. Like, let's begin the discussion, I think, for...
I guess the key thing to know here is we had this 1,000 plus players in one Discord server doing a kind of real-time text-based role-playing, and that was huge, with these bosses then doing this war game on top of it. And what I thought we'd start with is each of us here just maybe talking a little bit about one or two things we thought were particularly interesting or unique about the game. I guess I'll just jump in and start. So early on, me and Pierre decided to run a kind of intel scam kind of spying thing. So we inserted Pierre into Luke's faction, the Hackers Collective, who are the intel guys themselves. So it was a bold move, and I ran him successfully for about 3 weeks as his kind of handler. I belong to the Teamsters, mine and Sano's faction, for a really long time. And what I found really fascinating is I was so immersed in this that I really ended up feeling, like a spy might in a Cold War film, to the extent that I started doing some pretty weird things. So I was trying to bring intel to the bosses of my faction, which wasn't yet Sanai at that time. And I felt like I was being ignored or kind of dismissed by them, probably because they thought I was a spy, because my intel was too good. And this led me, I felt kind of resentful, and I wasn't, but there wasn't any personal gain really to any of this for me. And that's what's fascinating about all the role playing bit of this game is none of us could do anything except get credits, which, rapidly became almost worthless. And I ended up selling my data to my intel to other people. getting money then, which I would use. In my head, I was saying I'm going to put it towards the Union war effort, but really I just wanted people to pay attention to me. So I became just like one of these Cold War guys who defect not for ideological reasons, not really for money or personal gain, just because they want to feel important. And I just thought it was a fascinating experience, kind of putting me into this headspace. And I'm sure many of the other players had similar feelings during this. So yeah, why don't we go, Luke? What's something you kind of found interesting about the game?
So obviously it was like sold as a war game, and it very much was much more for a lot of players more about the role play, particularly for the non-boss characters. But where I thought it got really interesting was the friction of where the purely non-mechanical role play stuff rubbed right up against the war game. There were several times the entire station got dragged into war purely for RP reasons. Maybe not purely, there was still financial incentives or whatever for the factions needed money, but the RP, especially the relationship drama, nearly caused several wars, which feels really real, and it's very interesting as a mechanical space. This in the rules text shouldn't happen, but here we are trying to negotiate a peace based purely on, which is threatened by somebody being you need to let my girlfriend out of your faction. Which is crazy.
Super interesting. Go ahead, Senna. What about you?
I think the thing for me that was most interesting and the thing that I was most involved in was this was an incredible politics simulator that you cannot really get in a different game. Within the Union, we did not have formal political parties, but we effectively had different political parties. I spent most of the game kind of trying to maneuver myself to getting elected. I got elected in the last week due to a series of things beyond my control, but just the combination of, we had, the war game, which gave real stakes to things, and then we had all the people doing politics, and then all the people not doing politics kind of tried to, ignore us, who sort of still were part of the, fabric of the society that we were existing in. It was just a really interesting game that I feel you could not do at a smaller scale.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I think
there was an interesting moment for me in relation to this in the Union, where we had our Council of Ancients, which was the kind of secret circle of absolute spy head people in the Union who were scheming. You were in Alcyone, and you were kind of our candidate for the presidential election. There was a moment when I thought we were just absolutely going to lose, because everyone else in the Union had been role-playing mundane tasks like moving boxes around. Way more of them. There was maybe 50 of them doing that compared to 10 of us being weird in the corner. And I suddenly realized that none of them had any idea who we were, because we hadn't been shifting boxes around the docks with them. So some of them had got real political power within the Union just by playing this completely made up, even more made up than a normal role-playing game, completely made up game of shifting fictional boxes around, which they'd invented themselves. It was self-imposed, but there were people clocking on to go to work, and they'd got status just from doing this a lot. Yeah. It was really fascinating. Yeah,
this is something we deliberately in the CHC. Some of our, because we were quite small, and everyone was like, "What can we do to help win the war effort?" And I was like, "Go RP. You'll get so much intel if you just go RP. You don't need to actively be a spy. You can just talk to people, and they just tell you stuff. They're desperate for someone to talk to.
It's crazy. The social capital that people gained in this game was unbelievable. I mean, I'll show you a couple of sort of slides here, speaking on sort of both things that Luke and Sane mentioned, but being the war game existing, but being really heavily influenced by RP. This is what the bosses saw. We didn't get any. We as the denizens didn't get any view of this. We weren't able to see sort of where all of these armies and divisions were, of soldiers were or anything. We couldn't see any of that. You can see goods factories in the corner. Another sort of spreadsheet that one of the Union leaders had is this, tons of intel of where things were, where goods were, where troops were, and where they're meant to go, things like that. None of us saw that, that wasn't the game for Joe and I especially, but even you two as bosses, neither of you really interacted with the map aspect much, if at all, and yet the game was still really rewarding, I think, for both of you. Yeah, I think
we managed to go the whole game without activating any of our troops. We didn't raise troops. We didn't make more troops. We had manned one of our factories, but the rest of them were manned by Union Teamsters that just never got taken back. So yeah, we really just disengaged from that because we were so tucked away. We were we'll do the info, right? we knew what we were good at, and we knew what we'd lose at. So we were like, we'll focus on that.
But even with like the social capital side, you'd buddied up with one of the factions who controlled most of the map, and I think that was really helpful. They could have easily just crushed us, but they didn't. I think the thing that really stuck with me on the RP side is how creative the community was during the game. Bring up a couple of slides, but we'd get, I would say, almost daily sort of news reports that people would come. You don't need to read this, but it's sort of an example of like news reports that would come with obituaries daily that people had been killed or assassinated or had died because they didn't have enough money to stay alive. Lots of different sort of news organizations. I think the person playing Paige Lowe is in the chat now.
Yep.
And finally, I think
that was an almost daily one, and there was different kinds of media as well, right? So you had the almost daily, almost kind of like TV news or tabloid news. There was a guy, Floyd Merkins, doing real tabloid news, and then there was the more serious newspapers that maybe only issued 2 or 3 maybe weekly things because it took so long to put together and was out of date then.
It's crazy. And I think the thing that I like the most, and this is only from sort of looking back through the server to sort of pick through things to bring here. The reason I got killed in the last sort of week of the game is because Luke and the other CHC bosses found out I was a mole, and someone had put together this that I didn't see and Joe didn't see, but they stuck my head in a box and I was killed. I think so. For people who are sort of regulars to this channel, Joe's full name is Joe Dewhurst. I had joined because Joe invited me to the game, and I decided I'm going to be a spy. Let's give him something to cheer on. I call myself friend of Dewhurst, and I think it was only at the very end that people actually put 2 and 2 together.
Well, we were like, surely they wouldn't be that fucking obvious. Surely it's just a weird coincidence, right? Surely.
But I think the spy collection side was really interesting because there is the sort of social capital side. But from what I was doing as a mole in the CHC, I was physically screenshotting every conversation I was in and putting it into a big Google Drive folder, and then we sold that folder to people. And that felt quite tangible in a game where the denizens who aren't bosses don't really have anything mechanical that they can really do to impact the game outside of a sort of couple of different things like mining and things that people familiar with the game will know. Yeah, super interesting.
We had we recruited someone from Stratemeyer, and the player was really good at like Discord bots and whatnot. So they pulled all of the Stratemeyer text chat logs that they had access to, and we ended up selling that on to the Tempest, like one of the other factions who was at war with them. Like, yeah, here we go. Like, we'll just sell it. It's fine. Don't worry.
Well, meanwhile, Pierre, less technologically adept, had painstakingly took screenshots of the entire of his cell chat. Luke gave that to me, and I sold it to a different Stratemeyer employee who turned out to be Bratva, one of the gangsters eventually, and they gave me quite a lot of money for that, which I immediately put in the fund to try and kill your character. So it was really a twisted game we were playing here.
Yeah.
It was quite something. Yeah.
It was very interesting.
On the topic of social capital, one other shot you have there, Pierre, maybe we should do a shout out now, goes to the character known as Eustace, who people started doing headshots, so portraits for people, which was one of the kind of trades you could do. You could make little media for people and they pay you in fake credits. Eustace, people realized after a few days, is actually Kyle Ferrin from later games, who does all the art for Root and Arcs and Oath and everything. So everyone was extremely excited. So he ended up doing a huge number of these headshots, charging increasingly high prices, and I think became one of the richest players in the game, probably just from selling all these headshots. And that's a kind of that's a grab of a bunch of those there, and became quite influential because of this too. People wanted to get into his good books. He did indirectly contribute towards you dying, though, Pierre. He was in the Council of Ancients, which was fully secure. That never leaked, I believe. It was a trusted chat. However, his in-game girlfriend, Miss Monet, was a spy, and he passed on some intel to her accidentally because he didn't know she was a spy. So it's just really, again, speaking to what Luke was saying about these kind of social dynamics, that you can have very plausible kind of Cold War style leaks through a honey trap.
Yeah, like the fact that we actually had a honeypot operation in the game is just crazy to me. Like,
it wasn't on purpose because I don't. The player who was like running that asset, like, it didn't get mentioned, and it had been the whole fucking game. It was only like right at the end that we were told, like, oh, by the way, since we're kind of worried about the union, because like early on we weren't, and then towards the end we were, it was like, I have this really highly placed asset who's got so much access. It's like, oh shit, okay. And again, that's all RP. That was all through RP, from what I understand. That's how Monet got recruited, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, for money, it doesn't matter as well.
Yep.
Monopoly money.
Yeah.
Well, it's Monopoly money, but
it's more. Except that 1.5 million credits you gave to Eustace to pay for his portraits did nearly go to the Kill Fund. Eustace was one of the key proponents of the Kill Fund and did offer 1 million credits for your head, Luke, which wasn't a legal game move, but we were trying it.
It's fine.
I feel like we should explain what the Kill Fund is, because I don't think that's context. There's a guy called Tyler B who was raising money to assassinate other leaders, even though that was not a mechanic in the game. And he caused quite a bit of a stir, I would say.
He called himself. He's called his username Tyler B Kill Fund Manager, and he would just
collect money. Luke, you were saying something?
I was because a lot of my game was all about I need to not react, because as soon as I react publicly, that's it. He's won. I have to make sure I never say shit about this guy. But all the other bosses were like, you need to sort this dude out, and I was like, I don't even know who you're talking about, pal. Knowing the whole time this fucking guy.
That was the right thing to do, because he was definitely trying to get a response.
Oh yeah, because I was running around being a shithead and riling everyone else up, so it's fair turnabout. He was correct to.
He was also unrelatedly a big part of me getting elected, but that was unrelated to the Kill Fund.
I think something interesting as well is that every faction had a different rules document related to that faction, and every faction had a different sort of way of voting for things. So I think the Union or the Teamsters were the most sort of democratic faction, maybe, where they sort of one Teamster was one vote in all cases. Every time someone wants to change a rule of their faction sheet, a denizen can just say, I'd like to make this change, and then that vote would go through. I think for us, on our side, I say us, I was a spy, I was killed for being a spy, but for the CHC, for the hackers, it was based on this token sort of cryptocurrency that people could hold and people could mine for, and do a little mini game of set to mine for. And quite quickly, I think we kind of got scared. I think a week or two in, maybe a week and a half in.
If that,
yeah, the CHC got quite scared that other factions could get hold of tokens and then funnel them to one person within the CHC to complete the overall vote.
Because the tokens, you could create them, so you could generate new votes. And like the advantage of that was it powered our like intel engine, where basically we could investigate other people for free by asking the GM questions, which kind of links back to RPGs. So the original idea was like it would be like a balancing act of like, okay, so we want people to mine them to get voting power over us, but obviously we don't want to give them too much power, but we need the power they generate to do our intel operations. And we decided now we'd rather just have a hardcore collective of people who are really good at mining tokens, and we'll just remove the voting power from them, which led to a very interesting situation where, because it was a restricted access thing and there's not much to do in the game, everyone became obsessed with getting these tokens. So we faked somebody doing an open auction who then got assassinated by leaving the server. There was all kinds of shenanigans around it. And the price cratered. Everyone was like, haha, you've ruined your economy. And we were like, no, it's fine. Everyone's still mining because it's something to do in the game without many mechanical kind of levers for regular players. It's very interesting, the process of changing your own rules document to entirely change how the faction feels and plays.
And I think from what I understand, like, the bosses were allowed to just ignore that too, and it was... You
could break the bylaws, but if you got caught, then it was up to the people to do a vote in their confidence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating, like that there is that sort of leeway to be able to just ignore things, but that has sort of the similar consequences to not real life, but,
or lack of consequences, the case may be. Our bosses regularly broke the rules and then didn't get voted out because they were too popular or something. I have no idea what was going on there.
Well, it turns out if you break the rules and then say you broke the rules and call a vote of non-confidence on yourself, you are very likely to succeed on that vote of non-confidence.
It's life lessons, really. But I think what Luke, you were saying there, we could maybe move on to things that maybe we didn't think worked as well, or things that we were sort of tripped up by, maybe. I think two main things for me were the player expectations, which I think
Mhm.
Joe, you're probably going to talk to in a bit, but also speaking of the mining being, I think, the only mechanical thing that denizens, like the 1,000 plus players, could actually interact with, did sort of skew what the gameplay became for a lot of the denizens. And I think of and I know it was really impressive that existed in the first place in Discord. Like the mining mini game was really cool that you could do all through the Discord thing, and adding more mini games is a huge ask. But I think if we're thinking of like this idealized version, it did sort of it did change how people approached the game when they realized that this was the only thing that they could do. So why wouldn't they do it? You know, because they really wanted to have access to it. Like some people wanted to join the CHC or wanted a token just because they wanted to mine, you know, rather than because they wanted to influence elections and sort of things like that. I think that's quite interesting. And like, I think because how well that was done, it would be cool to see other sort of different, it would have been cool to see other sort of similar mini games for other things. And some factions actually created their own mini games. I mean, the Union did, right?
Yeah, I was going to try and pull up an example of that. This is for doing docs thing. So what would happen? Let me just pop this one up. You would get.
I'm gonna send it to me.
I can do it. I think you just need to give me permission to. It'll just be 1 sec. So somebody would say we had this special chat called the Teamster Dispatch, and somebody would say, so one player whose name I forget sadly came up with this kind of game idea. So if you pop that up, they'd say there's this job. So in this case, this cargo freighters come in and they list the different tasks that need doing. So fixing the coolant pump, loose couplings, whatever, and then there were particular reacts you had to give to that to say like, oh, I'm a trained engineer or I'm an electrician or whatever. So you'd be there doing that job, and then there'd be quite a lengthy kind of freeform RP chat about that. So they'd be saying like, oh, you know, I'm just doing the gears. Oh, some steam's come out. It nearly hit me in the face. And they do this in a fairly sophisticated way. But there is kind of a kernel of a game there, and there's this was going on a lot. So that could have been the Teamster game perhaps with a bit more work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, to be clear, this was entirely player, like denizen created. This wasn't a GM that made this. This wasn't a boss that made this.
Yeah.
It was fully player run and made. And I think that's awesome to see.
Yeah.
Really cool.
I do believe it was Dathan, yeah. Somebody mentioned in the chat, but it was Dathan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Dathan Drill's one of the close candidates for president, I think, because of this as well, because that's somebody who everyone knew. You know, that's the person handing out these jobs, organizing these jobs, and everything. And what again is fascinating there, I guess, a bit different to the CHC game, which was more structured, is people would, I think, stick to their roles to an extent as well. So if they were known as backsuit certified, you'd have to go and ping them to get that person in to do the job, because they're the only ones with the skills to do it. And it was really self-enforcing in this really fascinating way.
It's fascinating. Yeah,
there was a lot of like norm forming around what's acceptable and what isn't in an RP space, where it's totally freeform. Where like, because you can just say something now, it's true. But like people quite quickly synchronized on what that can and can't be, and that was obviously like different in different like kind of subcultures that formed. Where like in some places you get pretty crazy with it, in other places it's very grounded, and that's really interesting, and it's really cool to see people like. Find that neutral point between everyone's kind of tastes and work towards it without any reason to, apart from having a good time.
Yeah. I mean, in what case it's crazy how different the Union was. I think the thing that sort of turned me against being a sort of spy for the Union near the end was that like the CHC was so nice and organized and really well structured. There were clear lines of communication from the bosses to the people. You felt like you had a real say. You know, I actually suggested that someone should become a boss and like put a vote for them myself, because I was like, I should have someone on site, so maybe if I get some social capital to help them. And then they did become a boss, and that was really cool. It was really cool to see that. Whereas like looking at what Joe was working with in the Union. It's just a mess.
Hey! My favorite boss, my President Alcione, is right here, and we got her in eventually. It just took a while. But there were 10 times as many of us.
It only took one assassination.
Yeah, exactly. What's one assassination between friends?
So true. So true.
It's fine. It was interesting being the smallest faction, because we were like everyone was very disciplined. Everyone had a job, and like I think because there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on with disinfo in the game as well, and that was like part of what we were doing, like deliberately putting out a lot of lies and stuff. But internally, we were quite clear with our people, and when we couldn't be, we'd always be like, we just can't tell you this one because we had like a cell structure and each cell had like a capo who was in charge of it. Like, sorry, capos, we just can't tell you this one. You just have to trust us. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. That's cool. Which is a nice culture to build. And we got better over time as well. Like, I don't run a cell structure in real life. But if I ever needed
not anymore, at
a
least.
lot of lessons. Yeah, not anymore.
Yeah. I guess speaking to one thing Pierre mentioned there, something that ended up kind of a midpoint, I guess, causing fairly significant strife was this maybe mixed expectations or different expectations about what the game even was. So we had people joining who were expecting to play Mothership and would roll up a character when they joined, and we had people joining. They maybe hadn't read Sam's post well enough, to be clear, but there were people joining who were expecting it to be more kind of active wargaming, people who were just there for the freeform role-playing, and particularly in the Union, there was a bit of a clash of cultures around this at one point, so there'd be a lot of people basically just trying to work out what was going to be best for the faction to win the game, and a lot of people really honing in on the role-playing, and mixtures of those. So I actually found myself very frustrated by people doing huge amounts of out-of-character chat. I was also focused on winning the game in a sense, but I wanted to be doing that in character. I wanted to be talking about our strategy and things in character, even if that didn't really directly relate to the rules of the game. But people got really sidetracked into this, and there were it wasn't too heated, and considering there were 1,500 people in the server, I think it was fairly good. I think it would just be good to think more carefully about setting those expectations next time. And to be fair to Sam, I don't think he expected this many people to join. And he didn't expect the role-playing to take off in the way that it did. Although I do wonder what he thought we would be doing other than role-playing.
Yeah, as the denizens, like the bosses, I think, and they did do what they did expect, but the denizens had nothing else to do than role-play.
That was also sort of my thought on what the biggest difficulty was with the game, and that's also kind of where some of the magic of the game came from. So I don't really know how to reconcile the two, but I think especially in the Union, we had I would say about 150 active players on a daily basis, 330 players in total by the end of the game. Even as a denizen, this also probably helped me get elected, but even as a denizen, I felt like I spent a lot of time trying to manage people's expectations, trying to reconcile people with incompatible views of the game. There's the Union, for instance. A lot of people joined the Union because they really wanted to do a lot of debate about bylaws. And then there's a lot of people who joined the Union who absolutely did not want people to be debating about bylaws. I thought that was really obnoxious. And that's kind of a hard thing to reconcile when you have people coming in with two completely opposite ideas, not just of what the Union is, but like what the game is going to be in the Union.
Yeah.
Also kind of relatedly.
Go ahead. Yeah.
One thing that came up when I became boss is in terms of different expectations of the clash between people who are more wargame oriented versus more RP oriented is and this is maybe something that never comes up in other war games, is is it okay to kill people in this game? Mm-hmm. That was a big question, especially towards the end. Normally the answer in a war game is yes. The rules of the game are very much about killing people, and it's okay to do that. And there's definitely people who were more comfortable with an adversarial style of play, and there were some people who didn't want any conflict, and then some people who wanted conflict but no killing, and nobody had written down anywhere where their boundaries were. So sort of try to navigate that and try to make sure that the game is fun for everyone and that nobody has a bad time, but we're all playing the game we want to play. I
think that's super interesting because, sorry, to jump in, when my character was killed or assassinated by the CHC, I just sent a quick message to Luke on Discord, just privately, just with 2 eyes emoji, and I kind of could sense that you were like, "How is this guy going to react?" When I sent you that, because I don't know whether you thought I would kick off or be really pissed off that you killed me.
Yeah,
and I could feel that you were a bit "Oh, thank God he's not pissed off."
Yes,
that I killed him.
Yeah, and we said because each channel ends up with a character chat to blow steam, and I was like, "Hey everyone!" After we announced that we'd murked you, we were he's being a good sport about it. No hard feelings. Everyone's having fun. And it was cool.
Yeah.
But at first I was because I would be fucking livid if someone killed me. I put so much work to make sure that didn't happen. But it was because it is some people were "Oh no, you can only hurt me in ways that I've said are okay because it's my character," and there's in some role-playing communities, there's a lot of kind of barriers around like what is acceptable behavior to do to my character. My character is mine, and that is not the case in a war game, where obviously everyone's kind of fair game. Even if you have to deal with consequences, you can still mechanically do that. And it's a tough balance because you don't like Snow was saying, there's no way to mark that and say like, hey, yeah, kill me, I don't mind. Like, no one's going to do that except by playing a boss. That's the only way that you can kind of be like, do it.
Absolutely, for sure.
And yet you would still have been furious if you'd been killed despite being a boss.
Oh yeah, because I wanted to win.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry. So we've got a question from the chat here. What was the most unexpected thing that happened? I think do either of you if you want to like speak to that maybe?
I mean, the ending kind of came out of left field. We were shocked that we had a mole, actually. You were being revealed to be a spy. We thought we'd lock the shit down. We put in a lot of work to vet people. We ran ops on anyone who was slightly suspicious so we could run like intelligence operations. But we biffed the wording because Sam, being Sam, he was like, well, I'm answering the question that you asked me. And we asked if you were leaking to someone specific. We didn't ask if you were just a mole full stop, which is very, very silly of us.
Well, and we did actually cover once because we knew you were about to do that, and then Pierre voluntarily approached Denk and said, "I've been running this Union mole, and getting feeding him information to get his cred up so he can get in deeper in the Union." And I think that worked, which was great. I was so pleased with that. Yeah,
I came clean immediately with it. Yeah. And then I we were worried that you'd run a thing on us, so we deleted all of our chats.
Which might have been illegal. Yeah, I was iffy on that. Yeah.
I was iffy, but it's interesting. Yeah.
I do think by the end of the game, Sam was just directly asking people for intel ops because I got directly asked a lot of questions as to what I was up to, which was very interesting. I actually, I liked having that little out of game.
To be clear,
attention doing this.
He did ask me a couple of times, and I was like fully forthcoming, like what I was doing.
I think you had to be.
We
had some people who weren't. They just fucking ghosted him. We were like, "Well, don't get a refund on the intel op, pal. Can you fucking answer the GM, please?"
But again, that's the player expectation side of things, isn't it? That is just really interesting. Not necessarily good or bad, but because you can't please anyone with a 1,600 player game. But it was interesting.
I was surprised, and Pierre was as well. We talked about this. I was surprised when we reached this kind of peaceful state about halfway through the game after one faction was wiped out, and that had to do with the victory condition. So it quickly became apparent after that except for this one faction, Stratemeyer Syndicate, the other victory conditions were all compatible, which meant that the smart bosses you wanted to win quickly reached a kind of consensus there, although it was fragile still, which was interesting, and there was still some drama around that. But we were expecting the victory conditions to be more incompatible. But then the victory conditions that were there made the game work as a prequel for this module in quite an effective way. So I'm not sure if that was intentional or not. Luke might know more about that.
I mean, not to pretend like I know exactly what Sam was thinking, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was just like, okay, these look like they'll be interesting. I'm not looking to achieve a certain state. I'm just setting the initial conditions, and it's a big petri dish. I want to see what happens.
Sure.
Is what I'd imagine, because that's the kind of shit I would do. We agree on not everything, but a lot of things.
Of course. I think what was it? Yeah, go ahead, Sunny.
I mean, I think what was interesting about the victory conditions is it was a very Cold War type situation where it was to nobody's interest to go to war, but nobody trusted that somebody else was not going to start a war,
Yeah, absolutely.
And not always for good reasons as well. There was a lot of near war starting for nothing to do with victory conditions.
Which is great, which is really cool, I think. But I think also something that I saw a few people talk about near the end of the game was that tonally they thought it was a little odd that we had sort of reached a peace in our time sort of situation, which is completely valid, which is why I think sometimes war would break out for these sort of RP situations, because people sort of saw like, oh, we've clearly the bosses know that they can win without like ruffling too many feathers now, but is that what this is? We're meant to be this sort of capitalistic, horrible hellscape, dog eat dog world.
That had to do with the depth of the roleplay. I think that people were so into it, but in a way, there was a lot of it, because of the context of it. It was hard to roleplay somebody completely different to you. Of course, Luke is nothing like Big Dog Beef Stink, but which meant because most of us aren't murderers, I think it made it hard to go to war or to kill somebody once you got to know them, just because it's genuinely a difficult thing. Which I think coming from a role-playing background where we just go and slaughter loads of orcs or something, I think is really interesting that we're in this context where we know everyone, so it becomes hard to kill people.
Also, we're inhabiting even in a war game. Oh yeah, go ahead, Sam.
I think another thing that was interesting is because the bosses were the only people who could actually win. That and the top 10 richest people, and the bosses were also the only people who would experience. Were the only people particularly likely to experience consequences. Like some denizens were assassinated, so I think as a result, there was an interesting dynamic where I think a lot of the denizens were more pro-war than the bosses.
Very interesting, and I think this might link it slightly into later or now discussion about Sam's other game, Cataphracts, where in the setup to Over Under this game, he describes the bosses as commanders within this sort of Cataphracts game, as the ones sort of moving the levers, making these decisions, and clearly going to war, because that's the point of that game. You're at war in that game fully. So that really changes the sort of calculation of what you actually want to do, because it isn't just RP, it's a game that you want to win.
Yeah, it's very much like my experience with Cataphracts, which wasn't a huge amount. My guy got iced, but it was it's a war game with RP elements because it's so focused on the logistical side. But a lot of what you're doing is writing letters to people and informing them. A lot of it's the information game, because it's the cold hard facts and logistics. So anything that's relevant to that becomes really useful info for the rest of your faction to know. And Sam's spoken a bit about the interesting player patterns that come out of that. Everyone's quite loyal. I played a mercenary and I didn't knock on my boss. I was even though I'm a mercenary, I've been captured. The smart thing and the in some ways the end character thing to do would be to go informant mode. I don't think I would do that, and it is a little bit of RP there, even though it's actively the bad thing to do from a pure kind of numbers game thing to do, which is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for context of what Cataphracts is, for people who maybe aren't familiar with it, it's a big multiplayer, real-time, crucially, war game. I think it's more fair to call that one a war game, maybe, although it has very heavy RP elements. War gamers in the audience might recognize it more as similar to Vol de l'Aigle by Didier Rouy, 2004. Sort of a very limited information. You are one person. You are your commander with your army. As Luke says, you're sending out messages to other armies on this big map that is obscured to you. Limited fog of war, or very limited field of view. Except the key thing for Cataphracts, I think that makes it interesting, is the real-time aspect, but also the multiplayer aspect, as in multiple factions. It's not just 1v1, it's 3 factions, 5 factions, however many. And I think we could speak to that, Joe, if you want, or do you think we have a couple more things we want to touch on for Over Under?
I guess maybe just the both of you who were bosses in very different contexts in the game. How was that for you? How did it feel play? Was it actually a lot of work, or were you more focused on the silly RP stuff? There was lots of RP going on from Big Dog, so surely.
I mean, yes. So because of the nature of our faction, we knew we were small, we knew we were agile, and we knew it was all about intelligence and relationships, because those are kind of the same thing in a lot of ways. Not always, but a lot of the time. It was kind of a deliberate. At first, it was okay, I've spent a week of this game. It's I'll venture out of our faction HQ and I'll start doing the RP. So it's hey, this shit's really fun. So I've not done anything the kind of forum RP stuff before. It's I'm having a great time doing it. Yeah. And then it also kind of became useful, especially because I could draw a lot of the negative attention on myself by RPing as an aggro dickhead with a lot of emotional regulation issues. It was also very entertaining for me to literally he was a troll in the game. I was upsetting people and getting delicious reactions and building my scrapbook of hate mail, and it was great. But being able to back up some of the shit I was saying. So like the most like I think my crowning achievement, a Stratemeyer employee, like one of the denizens was like giving me shit in public, and I was like, I'm gonna make you bark like a dog, to like as like a humiliation ritual, because I was a shareholder in the company. They had like the whole mechanic, and I managed to force through a referendum that he had to do that, which sums up what a piece of shit my character was, but also the very interesting that was a mechanical thing that in their constitution this player character had to do that shit. So yeah, a lot of RP, because it was so useful, and also like the conversations with the other bosses. Like when you RP it, it's really fun, and you're still, especially being like the spy faction, there's a lot of like tension and like, are you going to read into what I'm saying? What are you going to think I'm saying? How do I make you, even though I'm just telling you the truth, how do I make you know I'm telling you the truth? And how do I buy credibility with my words? That shit's really engaging, and it's a very different skill set to what you usually use with a war game.
I think something interesting with Over Under that is sort of taken a little bit from Cataphracts, but wasn't intended, from what I understand. Cataphracts is very much where you are. Like that's the most important thing. Exactly where you are in a physical space, having this sort of like, I am here, it takes ages to send a message here, whatever. This instead is entirely in a Discord server where you can chat in any channel, chat to anyone at any time in any channel. And yet people did RP-wise, they were like in a specific Discord channel, and then someone else would pull them out. So they would RP leaving that channel and then walking into the other one to talk to someone. I think that's crazy. That's really cool that like happened, and that people like planted themselves in a physical space within this sort of digital space that we were never really given a detailed map of. It wasn't somewhere that existed. It's just, let's say one of the bars, someone would be in a bar and they want to go to the kitchen, so they would RP leaving the bar, moving into the kitchen. Wild. And they're all public chats that you can go into. And sometimes they're private. It's very interesting.
It was definitely the server architecture became physical space in a really interesting way, which I was not expecting. Especially because it's all publicly accessible logs, and a lot of especially bosses and like people who like doing more like intelligence work related stuff, they just search shit in there, and it's like, well, what does that mean fictionally? And there's a really interesting friction there where, like, for me, I was like, well, I'm the hacker guy, and I mostly name search myself. This makes perfect sense to me logically. But for other people, it would be interesting to hear what their justification was for having this like perfect kind of vision.
Yeah.
How was the boss side for you, Sanai? Yeah, anything unexpected? Yeah.
I mean, I guess regarding searching, I just did not justify that. Like, I think I kind of was. Sometimes I would be in like an RP mindset, and sometimes I was not. And I think there's like a level, like there's playing the game in an RP way, and then there's playing the game in a non-RP way, which is separate from playing in an RP way and from being out of character fully, if that makes sense. So I would say I kind of had almost like a work-life separation in the game, where I was either doing political stuff, in which case I would not worry as much about it, or I was off RPing, I was in the mop room, I was in Savage Diver, wherever, and then I was being more diligent about physically inhabiting the space. I did do a thing where I RP'd watching video logs in this room. It's like I come in and I watch all the video logs of the last 12 hours. But I didn't do that like all the time. I only did that. I think I did that once in the Ember. I guess how it was as a boss. I was spending way too much time in the game before becoming a boss, and then when I became a boss, it just I could not have done it for any longer than I did. I kind of wish I could have, because there's a lot I would have wanted to do, especially regarding the bylaws, but just keeping track of 150 people and all of their problems is just so much work on top of all the other things I was trying to do simultaneously. I did have a lot of fun doing it. Like I mentioned, I really enjoyed the political aspect of the game. I really enjoyed all of the various conspiracies I was in. But yeah, it definitely, I would say, in the end, felt more like a kind of a cold war game than a hot war game. I'd never looked at the board. Well, I looked at the board and then I decided it was Marine's problem.
Yeah. That looks like someone else's problem.
How does being a boss in this game compare then to being a commander in a Cataphracts game from both of your experiences?
fucking incomparable.
Yeah.
This was a full-time job. Like,
Mhm.
I got really fixated on it, like quite badly, to be honest with you. Like I've said, like that was great, never doing it again. I just not sustainable for me. It got its hooks in bad. It was like nothing else. Like it's Cataphracts. I like log in once or twice a day, do a little bit of scheming, have a good time, send a letter or two. This it's like a constant, and because especially as a boss, you've got other people feeding information back up into you, so you don't need to go out and like find stuff. I've got like, and that plus the RP stuff. People are like, hey, do our characters want to hang out today? And it's like, oh, that'd be nice, but I've got literally I can't. I'm busy with work, and work is doing RP with somebody else, or like
Yeah.
planning some horrible scheme how we're going to trick someone, or like crafting a intel up or whatever. Bizarre experience.
It's fascinating. It's really fascinating that it was quite literally a full-time job.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting that people often talk about Over-Under and Cataphracts in the same sentence, because I feel like in some ways they're very opposite experiences. Like Cataphracts is pretty slow-paced. Cataphracts has very limited communication. Like if you want to talk to somebody, unless you're in physically the same place, you are sending a letter, and the letter may not even make it. You might send the letter to the wrong place. So yeah, I was playing like in 3 Cataphracts games at the same time that I was doing Over-Under, and the Cataphracts games like barely affected my Over-Under time at all.
Okay.
I did forget to submit orders on time once, but that was it.
Well,
It's
as I'm
interesting.
about to join a Cataphracts game, I'm very glad to hear that, because my real life work definitely suffered somewhat from this. Yeah, but it'd be great. It'd be great to talk more about Cataphracts again in future. I think once me and Pierre have played it some more, it'd be very interesting.
I think it'd be cool to maybe chat to Sam as well, try and get him on if he's willing. The only reason I make the connection between both is because people non-stop would make the connection in the game itself, but because Sam frames it on his sort of initial blog as Over-Under being a take on Cataphracts, which I think is really interesting that he's done that. Like, and I think that the single connecting thread is that real-time aspect, which is really unique, I think, in this sort of structured game. Having it be fully real-time, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I think because the real time is the secret sauce to Cataphracts as well, just in a very different way. Because like knowing that if I miss something, if I take a long weekend and I get attacked, I don't get to put in any tactics or anything. And like there's a bit of rubber banding to be generous, but like you could just miss shit, and that happens. And that's kind of like real war. Like that's kind of the whole like the pitch. It's like I
know for fact a few operations were carried out when people knew that people would be asleep. Stuff like that.
Like
Crazy
Theory crafted like a vote of no confidence against the Bratva because it was only lasted an hour. So do it when most of them are asleep. Do it UK time. And you wanted to remove someone, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And what's cool and interesting, I think, is that in a certain frame of mind that might seem like cheating, but it has to be you have to take it as an intentional part of the game, or else the game's just not going to work, I think. So in a Cataphracts game, maybe you're off to a wedding and you actually become ill in game, or you're unable to give orders for some reason. You just have to treat it like that. Otherwise that real time aspect can't work, because people aren't going to be always plugged in.
So Timothy asks, does some of the deceit and secrecy spill into your IRL relations? I guess sort of speaking to people, because 1,600 people, a lot of people knew a lot of people from outside of the game, but a lot of people did not know people at all who they were interacting with. So, I mean, how did that affect you? Do you want to talk on that maybe?
I mean, I guess one of the things I like about these types of games is very much that you could do things that you don't do in real life. I did find kind of maybe like 2/3 of the way through the game at work, I had a thought of like, I wonder what faction that person is in. And it's like, well, I'm going crazy. I need to play this game less. But
I had some of that as well. I definitely started thinking like in a kind of like I was actually a spy in real life. I started thinking in really weird ways.
You bought something from Amazon and you were like, ugh, the Stratemeyer.
I did one thing I found interesting, I guess going back to this Clash of Cultures we discussed earlier, is there was a good friend of mine, Arthur McBagel, in the Union, and we were talking about getting rid of the president before the president got whacked off, which I have to say on air. And Arthur said that he'd have to stand aside for any vote of no confidence because he knew the president in real life and wouldn't vote against him, even though they were opposed to him. But to me, coming from a kind of board wargaming background, growing up playing games like Diplomacy, I have the exact opposite feeling.
Yeah,
if my real life friend was president, I'm absolutely going to stab him in the back. Like, and they know I'm going to do that. Like, I was running Pierre as this mole, and I didn't even trust him. I thought he could easily turn on me. And that seems maybe a fascinating difference from people with this more wargaming or board gaming, kind of social board gaming background to maybe more of a role-playing background or a certain kind of role-playing background where you don't have inter-party conflict. Although in my D&D games, when I was a teenager, we did have party conflict, of course. But there's at least kind of version of a role-playing culture where you don't have that party conflict, I guess.
It was because I'm mates with CK, who played President Sanyang, and I was like, even in the boss chat, I was like, oh, fucking CK's just being aggro. Of course he is, sort of thing. Even though it's like, I didn't trust him, and then when things happened in game, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I thought it was CK being CK. It's an interesting, because like you say, in a board game, it's like, I know you're really good at the board game, so we're all going to focus on you to make sure you don't win. And I think that's part of the fun texture, and it's like the tension between that and just being your character is really fun, I think. Like in a way where it's like there isn't a right answer, and if you can make the two things sync up, great. And if you can't, you got to make a choice one way or the other. Which says something about you, I think. Which is cool. I think
so. Yeah.
I did not tell anyone I know in real life about this game, and I really enjoyed not knowing anyone. I tried to learn as little as possible about people's real life identities as possible. It was not possible, once people started saying, oh, Big Dog Beefsteak is Luke Gearing. I tried to just know nothing but what was in the game.
Yeah, it's very interesting, like clicking on people's names and being like, oh, 3 mutual friends on Discord, what? being like, where's the links? Yeah. And usually it's Eric in chat is my link, but I think so. Arno has asked how is Cataphracts versus Vaudeleg or Flight of the Eagle. I don't know if any of you have played Vaudeleg. Vaudeleg is specifically Napoleonic, so that's a very big difference. It is play by post more than this is. I think Joe and I were chatting about how Over Under or Cataphracts isn't really play by post at all. It's real time, and that's the key.
Well,
to it. That's
over under is, and I don't think Cataphracts necessarily is, because you are submitting, orders at 1 point per day or something like this. Whereas, over under, like I've done forum play by post role playing, and people made that comparison. But I saw an interesting comparison today where someone said there's this other medium that exists called real time text role playing, which I haven't done so much. But that's precisely what the role playing side of over under was, because if there was a scene going on, you had to literally be there in real time, or else you were just standing there not saying anything, like a moron.
Absolutely. And the other big difference as well with Flight of the Eagle is that it's the French against the English or Austrians or whatever. Like it's two factions, distinct factions. Otherwise, they're very similar. Even mechanically, you look at the rules. I actually asked Sam about this, and he hadn't heard of Vaudeleg at all. He hadn't seen the rules at all, which is really cool to see. Like Cataphracts evolve from TTRPG first principles entirely independently from a game that is mechanically extremely similar, evolving from pretty purely wargaming principles, and like seeing both of them exist at the same time, trying to do the same thing. It's fascinating. And I think Vaudeleg does some stuff really badly. I think combat is dealt with awfully, but it does other stuff really, really well. I think the maps are much nicer and everything like that. I would try both. I think Cataphracts is probably a lot easier to play these days because there's 1,000,001 servers that people are running. And also I've seen servers with 80, 100, 120 players, which is insane for an umpire to deal with. So both are double-blind games. Both require umpires to play. That's the other key sort of similarity. I'd recommend both. If people are interested.
It is important comment in the chat. It is like a MUD, and that was my initial comparison because I'm old enough somehow to have played MUDs at the tail end of their popularity, which is a multi-user domain for any youngsters in the audience, which was indeed like a real-time text role-playing in the early days of the internet. People would be in a chat room like Discord and repurpose it for this thing, although there were some then more specifically made. And that to me is the closest comparison for the role-playing side of Over Under. And again, Sam may or may not have experience with MUDs, and it's interesting that kind of re-emerged almost, that culture re-emerged of like shared and voluntary narrative consensus, which you get in MUDs. There are still some going on, but it's not hugely popular.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think one thing that was interesting about how I approached the game is I had, people talk a lot about the, real-time role-playing as being the big part of it. I had very limited time to do that because a lot of the time I was spending in the game, I was on my phone and kind of jumping in here and there, but it was very hard to find time to commit to a scene when other people were also online. And so I think that changed a lot of how I played the game. I spent a lot more time in, I think, the union type role playing because that was a lot more asynchronous. There wasn't as much demand that I be able to talk actively for like an hour at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. So I think as a result, I sort of see, like, I don't necessarily see the game as being as entirely real-time role-playing as I think some other people do.
Well, because it's actually 20 different games because everyone was playing a different game, right? Like and with different casts of characters with a little bit of crossover, which I think is really cool. Like, there were people like, there's this big evil bug, and I've been told the story several times. I still don't really get it, and it's like I had nothing to do with the big evil bug plotline. And
I
it's
don't know
like for several people,
Yeah.
they killed their characters willingly because they died fighting the big evil bug, and I'm just like, damn, couldn't be me. I'm assassinating a mole, and we're like, it's just
like
different game. Great.
To that point, like this, I didn't know what the Hexagon Express was. This was a newspaper that I didn't know existed. Like there was like 6 or 7 different like frequent newspapers that existed, and they talked about these things that happened, and some of them just completely passed me by the entire time I was playing. It's crazy how like a real community grew that you didn't have total vision of.
Yeah, the newspapers actually fulfilled a function, like, which is crazy.
Yeah.
That just got me to think, kind of jumping back to a different point. One thing that I wish that we had more of it, like in terms of assassinations and so on. I wish people had been more willing to assassinate my character. Like I felt at the end of it, like people were pulling their punches a bit. We invented this whole election scheme to be assassination proof, and nobody tried to assassinate us at all. But that was very hard to do in a game where you didn't know where people were coming from in terms of their expectations.
It's also expensive. It was really expensive to kill people, and like unless someone was a real thorn in your side, or you needed to prove a message, like if someone was a fucking rat, then it just wasn't worth it,
But that's it. The worth it side of things. Like I don't think it was actually worth it maths wise to kill me, but it definitely was to like send that message and like show people like, oh wait, okay, they're willing to do this, and that's the super interesting layer.
Except it almost backfired because then we got furious and nearly went to war with you.
It would have been funny. We were on the other side of the map. It would have been fine.
Yeah, that's true.
We've got maybe 2 minutes left because I think we all have a hard stop at 6 p.m. GMT. So Vite asks this: how did everyone's knowledge ahead of time of the incidents that happened affect your opinion of how things fleshed out later in the community? Just trying to think what you're referring to as incidents.
I mean, nobody knew about incidents before they happened, but I guess if you're a boss, you might know that you're trying to do something and prepare for it. Not sure if that's incidents. So I mean, just to be clear, there are incidents that happen in the Pound of Flesh module. None of those happened in this game. It was very distinct, kind of narratively from that.
Choke Knight.
The choke.
Yeah.
So,
sure. Yeah.
That one was weird. That was like to give the really quick brief on it. There was like a big player-initiated ARG RP event that a lot of people thought was being GM-led.
Was real, basically,
Yeah, because that's the whole thing. If it's all players, it's not real, even though everyone's contributing. It's real for them.
It was interesting.
Yeah, exactly. There's no right answer, but it was a big messy thing where a lot of people felt like their trust was broken because they were like, "Oh, I thought this was real. Why didn't the GM warn us?" And a lot of the answer was the GM didn't know what was going on. They're dealing with a lot of other stuff. That's a crazy one. We like suspected that it might be fake, but the stakes felt too high to not get involved and not act like it was real.
It was really well done as well. Like it was pretty well done. So like you think that it's real, right? Like,
they did a great job. It was really impressive.
Yeah. I think last sort of to close up is to plug both Sene's and Luke Gearing's blogs in the comment section, I think. So do check out what they do. Anything that you're working on at the moment, Luke, that you think we...
Mothership Month, which is now past, so you missed the boat. It'll be in retail, it's fine. That's the big one, working away at that, making up for a bit lost time. Yeah, that's
nice. What about you, Sam? The Seedling games?
I guess the thing I'm kind of working on is a train heist for Knights of the Road, which is an Into the Odd like game.
Awesome.
Otherwise, pretty much just blogging these days.
Cool. Nice. Great. And Joe, I don't care about you. So great. Thanks, guys. That was fantastic. Really enjoy it. And yeah, good night.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you.
Everyone.